In this tutorial, I will show and explain the different simulation functionalities and output you have with COMFEN. And this is the part 2 of this tutorial, focusing on the comparison part. First, you choose which of the scenarios you want to compare just by clicking on them and dragging them into the comparison upper part. In this case, I've chosen these 4 ones. It is only possible to compare 4 at the same time. In this case, it's more into detail instead of at the overview window where it's only in more general terms. When you want to compare them, you need to have them simulated, the different scenarios, and if they are not simulated, there'll be a triangle arrow at the left of the scenario description. In this case, they are already simulated, so it's easier to see what kind of result COMFEN can give you. This summary page gives you a quick overview of the 4 scenarios you are going to compare: the annual energy use, the window heat gain, and daylight levels for a specific month, day, and time. And you can change these and then update. On these diagrams, you can move your cursor and look at the different spots in the rooms, and in this way see the differences between the different scenarios. Typically you should have locks between 200 to 2000. So in this case, when it turns red, then it's maybe too much, and there's a risk of glare in these cases. And last, the annual average thermal comfort. And here you can move your cursor around and get the different result and see what is the differences. There's not that big difference in these 4 scenarios. As you can see on the energy page, there is as well some sub pages. The first one, the zone. This is more into detail in relation to the energy, the CO2, and the peak demands, and for the 4 seasons for each of the proposal. Here you can as well move your cursor and look at both the total and the specific subcategory, in this case the fans, and they are shown over here, the colors. Monthly zone, here it tells something about the peak days when there is most need of heating or cooling, and here the energy use is divided out for each month and the peak. And last, the CO2 emissions. Last in this category is the monthly facade, where you can see the heat gains for all windows, in this case per unit floor area. This you can change to per unit window area, but in a way it's showing the same relation between the different scenarios. It's just different ways of showing the heat gain. And in the bottom, the peak gain. The third page, facade, showing in a more visual way the heat gain. That tells you something about the heat gain time on day and in relation to the month. And this can be shown either per unit window area or per unit floor area. As you can see, there's a big difference which type of visual style you are choosing. Window page is the same. This is just for the heat gain for the individual windows, and when you have more than one window, you can shift between the different windows you have for the specific scenario. The next one is the comfort page, that's telling you something about the hourly thermal comfort for each of the rooms for the different seasons. So the summer, winter, spring, and fall, and the percentages people are satisfied with the thermal comfort. And this can be shown per scenario or by seasons. So in this graphical output, it shows for each graph the different seasons, and each of these columns is for the scenarios, so you can compare it in this way instead. The daylight page have several under pages. The first one, the average daylight, reference point 1 close to the facade, and the reference point 2 in the back of the room. And again, you can see the different daylight levels for each of the scenarios by moving the cursor on top of the columns. And the hourly average, it's showing for the whole year on different times on the day, again for reference point 1 and 2. The seasonal average daylight illuminance, reference point 1 and 2, and this is only shown for the reference point 1, and you can change it up here to reference point 2. And of course there's less daylight in the back of the room, again for the 4 seasons. Illuminance profiles showing different levels of lux from the distance from the facade, and again you can move the cursor around. The reasons for it's cut off here, that's because It's have a higher daylight level over 1400. That's why it's not shown here. This is quite interesting to look into. Glare, there's 3 subcategories. The first one showing almost the same as the one with daylight. This just showing the useful daylight, and that is between 200 and 2000 typically. And here we actually can see the values for this scenario 125. It's have a huge amount of daylight in front of the facade, and then the daylight drops further from the facade. Again, for the 4 seasons, these clear sky and diffuse sky is a spatial view inside the room, where you can see in this case with false colors on how the light is distributed into the space. And the clear sky, that is just a sky with any clouds, and the diffuse sky, that's not direct sunlight. So in this case, it's without false colors. It's just shown in grayscale on different time steps on each day. And these you can change, and you can change the month and date and the resolution. This takes a little while to simulate some of these. And the last one, the tabular page. Here you have all the values in numbers instead of visual graphs. Sometimes it can be more easier to read and compare the different scenarios when you have numbers, because in this case they are pretty close to each other, some of values for heating and cooling and etc. So this is quite nice to have in numbers as well. Most of these visual output you can get out from COMFEN. For these spatial views you can double click, and for some reason it generates 4 similar views, but you just close them and then you can save the image. Most of the graphs you have the same possibility as well. You can export to CSV file, that's a file format that you can open in Excel, or you can export it as a PNG, as an image file, and in this way you can work with the output and create your own visual style if you prefer that. But one of the strong things with COMFEN, that is, it's very user friendly and you have the possibility of compare different scenarios. So you maybe not need to take the information out and work with after, because it's a design tool and not a documentation tool.